This is Edna's Radio, 1540 AM, 104.5 FM, the national voice of the Bahamas, where only the sun covers the Bahamas better. I'm Ronald Sims, Barefoot, and you just hop on board the Culture Caravan. Riding along with me today, Adrian Archer, Director of Music for Christ Church Cathedral, and a couple of other things. Good morning, Adrian.
Good morning, Barefoot. Good to see you, man, Ronald. You okay?
Likewise. How have you been?
Busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been busy. I've been traveling the country with the National Arts Festival. And there's a lot of things going on. This is a busy time church-wise.
Yeah.
And so music is just... I'm making it one day at a time, literally thinking, okay, what's tomorrow? What's the next day? And making sure things are in place.
You're all caught up in the music.
Caught up in the music.
Is this the busiest time of the year for the church?
It's probably the busiest time of the year. It's even busier than Christmas, although people think that Christmas is a bigger festival. But this time of the year, this Lent, Holy Week, Easter time, is just it's unbelievable for church musicians. There's no doubt about that. Organists, pianists, choirs, they're just enveloped with flooded with just stuff. Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that. That's the topic of our conversation for this session. But before we get to that, the National Arts Festival, you're the vocal adjudicator for the National Arts Festival, the E. Clement Bethel National Arts Festival.
And E. Clement Bethel was my mentor, so it's a great privilege of mine to be the vocal adjudicator. So I adjudicate the voice and choirs, and also stage bands, along with a couple other the adjudicators. So we've been to Eleuthera. We have been to, we've done New Providence for 2 weeks. This is the last, it ended last week. This week is Exuma. 2 weeks from now will be Grand Bahama for another 2 weeks. And then we break for Holy Week and Easter week. And then we come back and we go to Abaco. And then we go to Bimini, the Berry Islands, and Andros, and Long Island.
You're traveling the islands of the Bahamas.
Yeah, in fact, Cat Island, Rum Key, Auckland's Crooked Island, and San Salvador and Inagua week after, 3 weeks from now.
Okay.
So we travel the islands and we go from one place to the next, listening to folks sing and dance. And I'm only the vocal adjudicator, but of course the other disciplines are piano, strings, instruments, junkanoo, art, dance, craft, and so it's film now. Film is actually a category.
Wonderful, great.
I mean, Clement Bethel would be extremely proud and would be mystified that all these categories are now in when I was in the Clement Bethel. I was a I was a participant in 1978.
About 200 years ago, eh?
About 200 years ago. Singing at St. Augustine's Hall. I can hear it right now. And to be able to be the adjudicator gives me great pleasure. And I'm really humbled by the experience. And it's a lot. Man, you know this. The amount of talent out there is just mind-blowing in practically every genre that I've encountered.
Right.
From small kids to teenagers who get up on the stage and just blow you away.
And the bands now,
those
man.
high school bands.
Listen, I had
that R&B, CV Bethel, GHS.
At the Sedurwood Regatta a couple of weeks ago, we featured them. That CV Bethel band, they're dangerous, boy.
They're dangerous. They don't play. Yeah. They don't play.
And they don't just sing and play, they're performing.
They perform. We had at our adjudication table this last time, Nita Ellis sat there while we were adjudicating, and her mouth was open the whole time because she's saying these people, these young kids are performing. Yeah. They're not just singing. They have the choreography down pat. I mean, GHS had the whole brass section. I was like, what is happening? And it's just amazing the amount of talent that's crafted out there, and children who take their musicianship very seriously.
And kudos to the instructors in the school system. They're doing an amazing job.
Absolutely right. That Ronald Justilian at GHS.
Yes.
Let me tell you, they're not playing down there. They're performing at school for a reason. But the same thing is at R.M. Bailey, and the same thing is at CV Bethel, and the same thing is at C.R. Walker. They all have these amazing ensembles of every type. CV Bethel came with a choir of 88 people.
88?
88 in the gospel section.
That's large.
That's probably the whole senior class. 88. They could hardly fit on the stage. But to hear that sort of musicianship with that amount of people, the poor choir director had to stand up on the chair because no one could see her after a while.
Oh, yes. And, I think I saw a clip of that.
Yeah, Sune.
Yes.
It's just amazing the way she could corral them together and to sing something that is harmony with that amount of people, that sounds pretty decent, that could be adjudicated properly. And it's just in everywhere you go, in Abaco, in Eleuthera, in Cat Island, everywhere you go, you just encounter this natural talent, and you have to just wonder and believe that this is God-given talent that these children have in this country. And so many of them have such great opportunities. If we were able to craft that into something that would be formalized in some sort of performing arts school or something, because I fear that some of these people would just drop by the way. And
as they have been doing over the years.
As they have been doing.
Now, fortunately, just recently it was announced by government that they are about to open a performing arts school.
Which is...
I wonder if that coming, though, because I'm tired of people talking, you know.
Well, hey.
Talk, man, talk.
Well, I think that at least this time around, there seems to be a formal plan for it.
Okay.
It's not just conversation.
Okay.
I've seen a presentation on it. I've seen that the gentleman who's sort of spearheading it is very serious about it. We had an opportunity recently at a presentation with the Dundas Board to have more conversations about it. So the government at the moment seems to be thinking very seriously about it. Now, the logistics of it is a different thing entirely, because a performing arts school requires performing arts teachers.
Yes, absolutely.
It requires performing arts spaces. It requires to have the right instruments, etc., etc. So you can have as much ideas in the world that you want to have, but if you don't have a rehearsal hall or many rehearsal halls and many teachers who are able to be paid enough, I mean, there's just a lot of things in that wishful thinking could get you. If in fact it happens, it would be a great thing.
Well, let's keep fingers and toes crossed. And I do. Let's cross everything.
Yeah. But in the meanwhile, though, I'm hoping that some of these young people who I've seen at the National Arts Festival will take on, luckily this year we had some gentleman who came down from some U.S. college, and he was looking for to recruit singers to take back to university. And I think that a lot of the teachers, I give my credit to people like Giovanni Clark, who's now doing his doctorate in the United States, but took his band members on the road so they could see what the real life musicians is like in the United States, or go to schools or get the opportunities to be more exposed. Our exposure level is where our issues are, because I think that sometimes we think that this is about it here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, when and I know
drop in the bucket.
There's a drop in the bucket. And that the behavior required by real musicians requires discipline. It requires a form of artistry that is above all the rest. Otherwise, you may as well be in the bucket.
And one of the good things about it now, it is so easy to seize the opportunities for scholarship all over the place now.
Absolutely. Everywhere you go. And now that you're, before you had to travel to audition, you could audition on YouTube.
And they're coming to you also.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So the opportunities are there.
Absolutely. So you found some gems out there through the Arts Fest this year? Some other gems?
In fact, there are a couple of gems, and I will say that, I try to put my money where my mouth is. Last year, since in my job as a musician at the cathedral, I have an opportunity to, during the summertime specifically, to focus or to showcase other talents, because the choir is closed. So I grab all these young people, and every Sunday we feature one of them or one or two of them in the services, and we pay them a small stipend. Because this is the only way that they're going to get the exposure. And I'm tired of complaining about not being able to see them any other place other than at the festival. So if other people are interested, I just hit me up. I could give you a database of young, talented musicians, choirs, instrumentalists who could just come in and supplement a service, because I think that's the only way that they feel secure in their talent and feel the need to want to do more and do better.
All of the best musicians today seem to be in the church. Some say that the church is a new nightclub and they're paying good. So they're paying real good.
Well, that's because the competition to have good musicians is out there for the church. And I think that the days are past when you say, oh, God, give me that talent. And I'm one of those that advocates paying musicians what they're worth. Because you can't take talent to super value. I mean, you would love to, but you can't. And so if someone's going to compete for their position in the church, I have no problems with that, as long as they're dedicated, as long as they are where they're supposed to be. And that is the issue I do a podcast called The Choir Room.
Yes.
And a lot of the senior musicians who have interviewed on the podcast always come back to the same point, that our younger folks are, one lady said, prostituting themselves from one church to the next. They pay here for an hour, and then they run there for another 45 minutes, and they run someplace else.
They're making that money, man.
They're making that money.
Yeah.
And so that may be the case, but are they dedicated to the work? And are they putting in the kind of effort they need to put in at the time? And are they a part of the ministry? You see, that's the difference between a church musician and a secular musician, in that, you can get your money, but as a musician in my church, I want to be a part of what my church is doing.
Oh, some of them are just mercenaries now.
Yeah, they're mercenaries. Like, you pay them for a couple of hymns and a pay anthem, and before you blink,
they go on to the next gig. Yeah.
So there we are.
And don't hang them up because they can leave you.
They can leave you. Exactly.
I've seen it happen.
Exactly.
But it is good that there are now more avenues available and open for these people to get some work.
Yes, and because the church offers, when I say the church, I mean in general, offers a variety of music, then no musician can say they can't find something to do in the area that they like specifically. There's some jazz, there's some this, there's some that, there's some praise and worship, there's some classical music, and you can go to just about anywhere around this country and find that sort of musician or that sort of service that really speaks to you.
Yeah. Well, it's good that it's happening. I'm glad that you are finding these new gems in the Arts Festival. But you got on a new cap again since I saw you last. You are now vice chairman of the Dundas Center for the Performing Arts.
That's another story. And to fund anything other than the work of the Black Box. And so we've been going around raising funds ourselves, appealing to corporate sponsors and the government to get some large amount of money in so that we can at least get the air conditioning fixed and get some of the seats repaired and get the theater open again, so that if you're paying $40 per seat, then you could actually get into a position where more renovations can be done to the theater. Because the theater is a very important part of the history of this country. And in addition to that, what it does really is no other theater per se, certainly not a community theater. I mean, you could go to Atlantis and have your big to-do, but that is not a community theater, and that is not a place where people can afford, a church can afford to come and have a production. You can't do that at Atlantis or Bahama. You have to come to the Dundas. So we need to have the Dundas operating, and we've gone now into a lot of work to raise the funds to at least get us back in operation, and then additional funds to expand, because the idea obviously is to have an amphitheater in the back named after James Catlin, and the idea is to move the box office to the front, and so there are lots of things in the pipeline with respect to the expansion of the Dundas Theatre.
Well, hopefully you can get it up and running. Between you and Nico and Phil, y'all can bake pretty good. So hopefully we'll get somewhere with it.
Let's give credit. The government entered into MOU with the Dundas to fund a portion of the renovation, which includes obviously the Dundas participating in the performing arts program which the government wants to have. And they have signed MOU, and they are sending the funds. And so we hope to start the work on that sooner than later. And hopefully, by the fall, or by at least toward the end of the year, the Winston Saunders Theatre will be up and running.
So that's good. There's hope.
Yes, there's hope. There's hope, bro. There's hope.
Keep hope alive.
Yes.
Keep hope alive.
Yep.
Now, we are in perhaps the most solemn, busiest season of the year in the church calendar.
Yes.
Lent. Walk my listeners through Lent. What is Lent? What is the significance of Lent? How long is Lent? When does it end?
Well, it's funny because Lent, I was, thinking about this. I've thought about this a lot. Lent is a penitential season. When you think about the church in its liturgical year, those of us that observe the liturgical year, and most churches do, because most churches will observe a time of penance and Easter and Pentecost and Christmas and so forth. So whether you are formally observing it in terms of using the formal readings or not, these seasons of the year exist in the Christian church throughout the country and the world. So, of course, if you take it that the beginning of the church's year is Advent, which is 40 days before Christmas, and then 40 days after Christmas is Lent, the significance of the 40 is very important here because Lent is 40 days to Christmas. And they're 40 days after Easter. Lent is 40 days to Easter. And after Easter, 40 days to Pentecost. And after that, 40 days to the regular church's year. So that number 40 is very important. And so you hear hymns like 40 days and 40 nights, thou art fasting in the wild.
Right.
That's where that comes from. So Lent is the period right after we've celebrated the ceremonies of Christmas and the Epiphany, meaning the coming of Christ. So Lent begins with Ash Wednesday. So we begin Lent by going into a period of penance, and the symbol of that is the ashes. Ashes remind us that we are dust, and to dust we shall return. So people use the ash to put it on their foreheads or on their body someplace as a reminder that all this drama we carrying on with is nothing, because guess what? You're going back that same little piece of scrappy dirt.
And these ashes, Adrian, a lot of people don't know, come from the burning of the palms from the previous year.
Exactly right. So the Palm Sunday, which we are going to come to in a couple of weeks, the whole idea is that Jesus entered Jerusalem, and those persons who hail him as a symbol behind everything that is done with respect to some of these ceremonies. So you take the ashes that you had last year and you put it on your forehead or on your person someplace to remind you that you're ash, and then you spend the next 40 days in some sort of penance so that you are...
Or you ought to be.
You ought to. Well, there you go. You ought to be. You ought to be thinking more about, you should be more introspective about what you're doing, how you're acting, how you're behaving, what you're doing. And so you spend that time preparing for Easter. And so the whole 40 days leads up to what we call the Queen of Feasts, which is the biggest feast of the year.
Yes.
It isn't Christmas, it's the resurrection of Christ from the dead. So those 40 days include Palm Sunday and the other days. But bear this in mind, Lent does not include a Sunday.
Yes.
So the 40 days...
A lot of people don't know that.
That's right. 40 days are Monday to Saturday,
Yes.
and not a Sunday. Sunday cannot be considered... Sunday is always called a little resurrection day. So if you are giving up something, that means you should take it on a Sunday.
Sunday's
You know
a cheat day.
It's a cheat day. See, now, if Mortimer's was open on Sundays, I'd be there for comforters every minute. But Mortimer's closed on Sunday, so I have to obey the whole 40 days. Excuse me. And so those 40 days do not include Sundays. So after you've done that, we move then to Palm Sunday, which is the sort of reenactment of what we just did before. This whole idea that Christ is coming into Jerusalem and being hailed as king. And then before you could blink, he's crucified as king as well. So
let me take you back for a second before you move on. The palm branches that you bring together for the burning of the palm, is that done in a ceremonial fashion?
Not really. Sometimes there, but in my experience, we just put them in a tin tub and we burn them.
Okay.
Now, what happens sometimes in some churches, they would add holy water to it, because if you took the ash by itself, it'll crinkle out of your hand so that it stays on your face.
Oh, I see.
They
Okay.
mix it with holy water, and so it becomes like a paste, and then they put it on.
What
so
is
it stays.
holy water? What is this concept of holy water?
Well, the whole concept of holy water is just water that's blessed. There ain't nothing separating it from any other water except that you've prayed over it,
Okay.
and in some instances it's mixed with holy oils that have been blessed by the bishop during Holy Week. And those oils could be used for the sick or catechumens or for ordinations, and those become a part of what each church takes away from these services, and every church has holy oil in there that they could use for administrative purposes or liturgical purposes.
And so you mixed the ashes with these substances, whatever they are, so they can have some form.
So they have some form.
Okay.
So that when it's put on your person, it doesn't just fall right onto your shirt. You know what I mean? Now, some people get completely carried away, in my estimation. Some people are, the cross on their face is bigger than them. And it's funny because the Bible does say that you should do these things for men to see. So some people don't do the ashes thing. I'm one of those. I don't do the ashes thing because I say to myself, remember, Adrian, that you are dust. So I try to keep my self under control by always thinking to myself, you ain't bigger than you think you are.
Okay.
Because in a minute, all this talent which you think you have could be gone in a blink. And so I try to remember that always. I try not to be, boisterous about my talent or about my abilities, because I've seen it over and over again. Some of my dear friends, Cleophas, these people are gone.
Yeah, gone. In the blink of an eye.
In the blink of an eye. Yeah. And so the whole idea of having the representation is good. And I see that. But some people just do it for show. And it doesn't work for that.
So we get to Lent. It's the beginning of this whole process.
Yes.
After Ash Wednesday, what next in line?
Well, Ash Wednesday, first of all, after Ash Wednesday, we have the period of Lent. But of course, what happens in the middle of that is there's a period where we call Mothering Sunday. And Mothering Sunday is the middle of the Lenten period, and we take a break. This happens also in Advent, where they call it Gaudete Sunday, where you are in purple and you're sort of lamenting your sins and so forth. But then there's this one Sunday where you take a break from all of this drudgery. I hate to use that word because Bishop Ella will be very angry with me if I hear me say that. And you go back to something that is regular.
Any specific Sunday?
It is always, it is coming up. In this instance, it will be the 30th of March, this Sunday. And we use that time to sort of give ourselves a break from the solemn hymns, the solemn clothes, the purple colors that churches are adorned in, the purple vestments, and we go to pink. We use the color pink as a symbol of breaking away from the whole idea of the solemnness. Now, in the Bahamas, we have something called the Mothering Sunday Procession, where we have our Sunday school members from all around the diocese. They come together for a procession to the Mother Church, that is Christ Church Cathedral.
Okay. All the churches?
All the churches in New Providence will process to the Mother Church.
And this is essentially the fourth Sunday of Lent.
That's the fourth Sunday of Lent.
Okay. And
so that is where we gather, and our children, for the most part, they go through a ritual there that has to do with their Christian education weekend, which caps with that, and they process into the street the way you would have a patronal festival. So they process with their banners and so forth from the cathedral back to the Eastern Parade. And that happens every Sunday, every fourth Sunday of Lent.
From the cathedral to the Eastern Parade?
The Eastern Parade.
That's a good little
Yes, a good little set. Yeah, we used to march to the cathedral. The whole idea of Mothering Sunday comes from where you would march to the Mother Church. And in the United Kingdom, that's actually Mother's Day. So this whole thing is tied together. But now, because of the traffic situation, we march from the cathedral back to the Eastern Parade. Okay. And there's also some logistical reasons, which I won't go into because it don't make no sense to me. But the whole idea is you get together then, and then when that Sunday is finished, we go back to Lent. We go back to what's called Passion Sunday.
Do you go back to the colors?
We go back to the black. We go back to the purple. We go back to the solemnness. We go back to hymns like When I Survey the Wondrous Cross and O Sacred Head Now Wounded, because now we're getting very quickly into the most solemn time, which begins with our Palm Sunday. So Passion Sunday, we cover all of our statutes and crosses in purple in the church, which is the beginning of the signal that we are going to now go into the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And so those are the steps leading up to what would then be Palm Sunday, which of course commemorates the entry of Jesus into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey and being hailed with palms and branches and people saying, "Hail, hail, hail."
And these palms that you use for Palm Sunday will be the ones for the year.
For the following year, for Ash Wednesday. Okay. Exactly right. Okay. Exactly right. So, it's a yearly visitation of the life of Jesus. And I've found that every year I find something new in this yearly visitation. Now, in our church, because our readings are cyclical, meaning that we cycle through the Bible, and every piece of the Bible every 3 years, we call our cyclical churches lectionaries A, B, and C. For instance, this year, the readings come from lectionary C. So all of the biblical readings are in the year of C. Next year will be year A, and the year after that, year B. But for the most part, it just rotates back and forth and back and forth. And you find that for some occasions, the readings are different, although the Gospels are quite clear on the crucifixion and the resurrection. So there's no differentiation of those particular activities. And so it's easy to organize music for the most part because you can predict what is going to happen. Okay. And if you are following the readings, you can look at a piece of reading and say, oh, we're talking specifically about Jesus being thirsty on the cross. Which piece of music do we have that mentions the word thirst? And you pick that to use. That's which is what I try to do. As
is the selection at the discretion of the musical director?
Yes. Well, in some instances, yes. In some instances, no. In my instance, thank God, my dean is very happy to have the music director who has some skills in looking at the lectionary and saying, I suggest we use this here and this there. Now, the anthems, I have total control over. Hymns-wise, because we also want to be, I could be very highbrow, I've been told. And so sometimes you need to bring that down so that the congregation can attach themselves to the music. And I think that all musicians in the church must think about that all the time. That even though you may have your specific likes, this ain't all about you. You know what I mean?
You have a congregation
who
wants to be a part.
Exactly right.
Part of
exactly right. And in our instance, the Anglicans are very traditional. But sometimes you got to throw in one of them two little Church of God hymns, and you'll be surprised at how people rock and they dance back and forth because it's actually a part of our African diaspora. And so trying to select the music for all of these seasons is sometimes a challenge, but once you realize what is happening, it becomes easier to do.
But you got some traditionalists in them Anglican churches now. Yeah, want you stretching too far.
I have some tradition in my choir. They give me the side eye all the time. Like, what going on over here? You know what I mean? Yeah, some are like that. But I think that education means everything. It really does. If you say to someone, "Listen, we're doing this because of this," then they seem to think, okay, I get that. Or we doing this because of that.
Communication.
Yeah, you say it because otherwise people think you just drop it on them for no good reason other than your own selfish reason. And I don't like to be in that place. I like to be in a place where, and sometimes you can't, it is subjective, and so sometimes you have to just let it go and say to people, we doing this, and now let's move forward with what we're doing. Because there's a purpose behind most of what we do as musicians. I'm hoping that people will all agree to that.
So Easter calls for a lot of work on you and the choir's behalf.
Absolutely. Well, in the cathedral particularly, I mean, we start with Palm Sunday. So we have our Palm Sunday procession. So you're marching down into George Street and on to Cumberland Street and all the way around back to the cathedral. So you have a band, and you have people singing, and then the choir has to sing. And of course, the most popular thing is something like Ride On King Jesus. That sort of music is what you use for those sort of occasions. Triumphant music, because it is a triumphant entry. And then in the middle of the week, you have what's called the Blessing of the Holy Oils, and that's a diocesan service where all the clergy come together and the bishop blesses all these oils that will be dispersed among all the churches in the diocese. And then you have Monday, Thursday, which is another big to do because Monday, Thursday is the actual feast that commemorates the institution of communion. And of course, that is preparing us for Good Friday because at that time it's read that Jesus was betrayed in Gethsemane. So there's a lot of ceremony to do with that. Washing of feet and all these things are a part of the Monday, Thursday ceremony. And there's music that has to accompany that. Then Good Friday, and that's a 3-hour to do.
Oh, I used to hate Good Friday. Oh, my goodness. I'm like you. You grew up Anglican. I grew up in St. Agnes. Oh, my God. I couldn't take Good Friday. And another thing I couldn't take, that incense you use in the Anglican church.
What?
No, I can't. That's why I had to get out of the Anglican church.
Now, St. Agnes is carry it a little too far. Because some people are actually quite allergic and they get it gets into their sinuses, into their system, and they can't get it. I think a decent amount of incense helps with the solemnity, and if you know what incense is for, it makes some sense. But there are some churches that will have 2 or 3 thoroughfares,
Yeah.
and you can't see nothing in the church.
Smoke.
I ain't calling tonight this name. Nothing in the church except smoke. Now that is taking it a little too far, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But the ceremonies, some people can't do without it. Oh, you have to have incense for benediction, and if you can see the monstrance, then you feel like you ain't where you supposed to be. You supposed to be more. I won't feel like more prayers are sent into heaven. Blah blah blah, that type of thing.
What role do the Stations of the Cross play in this whole exercise?
Well, the Stations of the Cross remind us of the various movements of Jesus to crucifixion. So, in some places they call it the Way of the Cross. And so the Stations of the Cross is a short little 45-minute ceremony where you go from one station, meaning one plaque that says Jesus has fallen for the first time, Jesus fallen for the third time, Jesus fallen, and these are the things on the way to crucifixion. And there's a prayer and there's a short reading at each station. And most churches have Stations of the Cross at least once a week during Lent. Some people have it every day.
Every day?
Yeah, some monasteries and churches will do it every day, so that it reminds you of exactly what this whole drama of Jesus is about. Most churches just do it once a week. And they find it either on a Friday, which is supposed to be a fast day, and they have their stations then. And now what they do is used to be totally involved by the clergy. Now what happens is the church organizations lead the stations, because there isn't that as... this is not like the Holy Grail.
When you say the church organizations, you speak specifically of who?
For instance, if you have the Anglican Church men and women,
right.
they would identify men and women in their group to go to each station and read the stations and lead the prayers and so forth. And so that takes about 45 minutes to do if it's done expeditiously. And in some instances, a small little meditation with a clergyman afterward and a hymn, and then you go home. But it's the whole idea, and of course, some people actually use stations on Good Friday as well. I have been in a situation where the Good Friday service began with stations and then went on to the Good Friday liturgy, which included, the meditation of the cross and a couple sermons and
Growing up, the Anglican Church was kind of hands-off to the laity getting involved in the services. That has changed now?
Oh, that has changed a tremendous amount. I think the only thing that clergymen do now, specifically to them, are things like saying Mass and blessings. When I said I mean formal blessings and, committals and so forth. But now the church is a lot more lay-oriented. There are lots of lay ministers, meaning people who can act in the capacity to lead services. There are lots of catechists, particularly on the islands where there's not sufficient priests to go from, you have 10 churches in Long Island and you only have 2 priests. So in the meanwhile, what's happening if you need to have a service? You call a catechist and that person's lead morning prayer. And it happens in Nassau as well now because you have a lot of these active ministries and the ministries are being developed so that people can feel more of a sense of ownership of what they have to offer the church. You can't stop that once you begin that process. You can say, okay, to be an ordained minister, these are the things that you're capable of doing. And unordained, this is what you can't do. And so before, like you said, in the days of old St. Agnes, you couldn't dare think about leading Stations of the Cross. That's out of the question. And you couldn't get up there and read lessons unless you were a lay reader. Now all the services have a situation where you can have people participating up until the time of the consecration of the bread and wine for communion. That belongs to a priest to do.
Okay. Is the church still challenged by recruiting people to join its ranks as priests?
Not in the Bahamas. Now, I know that it's in a lot of other places, but the diocese has more than 12, I think more than that now actually, at Codrington College studying to the priesthood, both men and women. And so we are blessed in this diocese. That's not the same in every diocese, by no means. But for some reason in our diocese, and I guess it's because we are an archipelagic nation, and so the diocese is not like the diocese of Jamaica where you could drive from Kingston to Montego Bay. You have to fly. You have to, to be the bishop of a diocese like this, it's nothing but hard work. Or even a clergyman, because if you have to be in Grand Bahama today, tomorrow you got to be in Inagua, and you don't drive there.
Talking about bishops, How is retired Archbishop Gomez doing?
Well, we understand that he's ill. He's been in the hospital since Ash Wednesday. His family released a statement to say that he had pneumonia, but he has stomach cancer, and that he is lucid at the hospital. But of course, people are not allowed to see him. I suspect that the clergymen are allowed to see him. I'm sure that the bishop and those are allowed to see him, and that's as much as we know. At this time.
How old is the bishop now?
Bishop is 88.
88. Woo.
Bishop has been in ministry for 66 years. Being Bishop of Barbados and Archbishop of the West Indies and diocesan bishop of the diocese. He has in his time of ministry made an impact across the Anglican world.
I remember when he was Bishop of Barbados. And we went down there for Caravan 81.
Wow.
He hosted us at his residence there in Barbados.
Yeah. He's made a spectacular contribution to the life of the church in the diocese and to the nation, to the Bahamas. He's one of the proud members of our community. Yeah. And we love the Archbishop very much. I mean, I do. Archbishop and I have a running joke in that whenever he sees me, or he comes to the cathedral, he expects a piece of music in Latin.
Oh, yeah?
He said, Adrian, I hope that piece is in Latin. I said, oh, Bishop, not today. And so whenever we talk, he said, oh, Adrian, you really must do better. You must bring some tradition back to the church. But I had an opportunity, actually, when he had his most recent service and recognition of his ministry, to interview him for the diocese, to sit down with a television interview, and it was fascinating to hear about his life in the Berry Islands and where he grew up and his time in Barbados. And of course, he's been on the international stage as the primate of the West Indies with all the other primates in Canterbury and making doctrinal decisions for the church. So he's not one of those.
He was a big muck.
He's a big muck. Bishop is a big muck, and a humble muck. You know, I'm sure he is aware of what he's contributed, but he wouldn't tout himself as a big muck. But he's a big muck.
Though retired, does the church still call on his expertise?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, up until his illness, he was active at St. Agnes. Of course, he came out of St. Agnes. Yes. And so he was active as an associate there at St. Agnes with Father Cartwright. And I'm certain that his advice is invaluable to Bishop Boyd. And to, of course, he and Bishop Thompson are good friends. So I'm sure they always keep in contact with each other. But people would call upon the Archbishop to write books, to be a part of the Anglican Theological Institute that we had. In fact, he was one of those that started it. So here's another way that people in the church can actually participate by being educated in the matters of the church without having to go to seminary. There are lots of, biblical courses, homiletics courses, liturgy courses. Bishop lent me a couple of his liturgy books so that I can teach a liturgy class. He has been that sort of, friend to all Anglicans in the Bahamas and around the world. So I pray for him. I hope that he gets better. So that's all we have to do is pray for him now.
How did you get here? You came out of a glitzy, glamorous tourism travel fun time. How did you get here?
Well, my life is interesting. First of all, when I came out of high school, I was 15 out of St. John's, and I wanted to be a priest. But I was too young to go to seminary.
Okay.
Sir Clement Maynard was the Minister of Tourism at the time, and he was chairing the board of those who were going off to study the priesthood. And he said, listen, you can't go till you're 18. So you may as well come work for me at tourism. And
that's how you get there.
And that's how you get tourism. So you come to work for me at tourism, and then when you get 18, you want to revisit it, you could. Well,
took a long time.
20-odd years later, I was still at tourism. I was still at tourism 20-odd years later. And yes, I ended up in the PR department, so I was traveling up and down in this country and that country.
You realize that's almost 40 years ago, Adrian?
40 years ago.
Because when we first met in the 80s, that's where you were.
That's right. And I did that up until 2004, and I then had another sort of idea to go back to the priesthood again. See, the church work has always been in my mind, and I've always thought that I would be a priest. But I feel now, having looked at the whole lifespan, that was never it. That my calling, if we want to call it that, was in church music.
Okay.
And so at that time, Bishop Gomez again.
Did you grow up musical though?
My mother played the organ for 70 years. My mother is still the head chairman of the music department at St. George's Church.
Oh, yeah?
And my grandmother, Agnes Archer, she played at St. Matthews for 70 years.
I remember Agnes Archer. She taught me in Western
Yes,
Junior
sir.
School.
That very same one. It's my Grammy. And so I grew up to the piano with both of them. Now, I couldn't be taught by them because I was rude. And my Grammy spanked me once, and I never gone back to her again. So I ended up at Muriel Mallory's table, and I did that there. And so I decided that I want to go away. In the 2004, I said to Vincent Van Wallace, who's our director general, I said, listen, whenever I come to the shop and I suck my teeth, I got to leave because I cannot be miserable to work. And so he said, you can work for the church. The church is worse than working for the government. That's what Vince told me. So I took my pension that I had earned, and a friend of mine, Father Fleischer, who's now deceased, recommended this conservatory for me to go to in Princeton University. So I said, let me go. I auditioned. This is how life has changed. I had to fly to New Jersey to audition. Now, they take auditions over the phone, over your little, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had to audition. And after I auditioned, I just changed my whole life. I went to study music, and I'm going to tell you, Ronald, that's the best decision I ever made. Because now people pay me to have fun.
Yeah.
Because this is jokes and tricks for me.
And the country benefits from your expertise now.
Well, I appreciate that.
Not
but
only
I'm
the
telling
church,
you,
but the nation as a whole benefits from it.
I'm telling you, the thought that I could get a decent salary to direct the choir and to wave my hands and go into Dundas and direct the theater piece, and I don't feel this bit of misery.
Not only the Dundas, because we've worked together on a number of
on
major projects.
That's right. That's right.
The tributes to Sydney
That's right.
and
That's right.
other things
That's
we've
right.
done.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I love it. I absolutely love it, and it has exposed me to so much and to so many things that I would have not necessarily done. The project with that we did with Eddie Minnis.
Yes.
It's the most amazing thing that I've ever done because I grew up with Eddie Minnis, and I never thought that we would put that to choral music.
Yes.
To some sort of traveling musical type. And so things like that, and having to do Sammy Swain, which Clement wrote, and I adored Clement Bethel. I mean, I adored the very idea that I would do a work, that I would be the music of his work, and then to do Cleophas lead a horse to water. Yeah. These are things that I didn't in my lifetime think that I could ever get involved with. So I'm thankful to the move toward music, because I think that in that I affect more people. And to be honest, I look at some priests and I say, well, I could never do that because I don't have the patience for that kind of thing. But I'm thankful for the abilities God has given me to be able to create stuff that people are touched with from in a subjective point of view, place, you know what I mean? Greatest move I ever make, and I tell people, you got to find something that you love and get paid to do it.
That's what they always say. Find what you love. Find your passion.
Find your passion.
Find your passion.
And the people know I'm passionate about it, and I can be passionate about it to the bad level. You know, people call my alter ego Bob. When Bob comes out, everybody run. People start running, and they say, oh, God, Bob. You know what I mean? That'll happen in the middle of church. That'll happen. I like to have things and see things done properly and correctly. I do not.
And in order.
Yes, I don't like chaos. You know what I mean? I try to organize my life, and so when it's time for me to do stuff, I need to be in a clear, centered place. And when I try to create music, I need to be in a place where people are cooperating, and that makes me the happiest person.
And so this Easter season again, outside of the traditional things that happen at the church and the Palm Sundays, the various ceremonial things, didn't the church always do some kind of a program, an Easter program?
Well, you would see that Easter and Christmas times where there's like a program, meaning, various people get up and sing, or there's like a play or a production. You don't see that often very much now.
Where did that go to? Why have we lost that tradition?
I don't know, and I think it has to do more with the involvement of people in church as a general. You know what I mean? Some people go to church, and when they go from church, they go home, and that's it. They don't see them no more till
Has
next
the
week.
church recovered from the pandemic and the virtual church?
No. Well, you know what? I believe that the church has recovered sufficiently, but has to now pivot to the fact that there is virtual church, that there are people who are going to watch it online, and now we have to figure out how to reach them. We cannot take that back. There's no taking back the whole idea that your church is on YouTube, and you can't take them off YouTube anymore. At the Christ Church Cathedral, we have had to not use a phone anymore to record a service and put it on YouTube. We had to create a studio that has professional, because we have people, members of our church, who only go and they watch it on YouTube. Now, as much as a day may say
some quality.
Yeah, so that not as a day say, now we want you to come to watch it on YouTube. We want you to come to church. You could say whatever you want to say.
They ain't coming.
They ain't coming. And
once they have that option, they ain't coming.
And there could be occasions where you could say, okay, well, now we're going to do this instead. And for the people out there, and if you don't address them, we want to welcome you and those in the virtual world as well, because they now are part of the congregation.
A big part.
A big part of the congregation. So we cannot pretend as though they're not there and the facility is not there anymore. And because you have to be sensible when you think about competing. See, the church doesn't like to use the word competition, which is a big problem, because guess what? You are competing. Yeah. You may as well just understand it right now. You are competing for the attention of your parishioners, for the people who are potential parishioners, and unless you make it presentable and decent and something that is actually quality, people turn away from it because you don't know. Someone could be looking at something virtual, well, let me go check that out in person next week or whatever. But if it's trashy, well, you know, that unfortunately is your footprint in the virtual world.
But is the church concerned with the virtual church impact more so because of the economic impact it may have on the church itself?
Well, I don't know, because in our instance, you know, we are able to maintain our finances from people who are even watching virtually.
Okay.
Now, you know, if you decide that that's the way you want to participate, I have a friend who never came back since COVID, but could tell me everything about my choir's performance every Sunday. Every Sunday, he'll say, boy, you really sounded good there. Oh,
so
boy.
Tuned in.
Oh, he's tuned in. So he knows exactly what's going on.
Sure.
And then if you don't find a way to capsulate what's happening in that service in one little slick TikTok, something that sends things out, you have to be in this new world.
You got to go with the times.
You are losing. You are losing otherwise.
Hey, listen, man, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me and sharing this information.
Yeah, bro. Times run quick.
When you're having fun. Yes. But let me, since we're coming up on Easter, and perhaps you won't get a chance to speak to your choir members in particular, share some of your sentiments with them.
Well, I appreciate, I'll say this, and I say this as much as I possibly can. These people put up with a lot, meaning me, because the cathedral in Nassau, Christ Church Cathedral, is not like any other cathedral in the world. That's my attitude toward music in Christ Church Cathedral. It is supposed to be comparable to Westminster Abbey or Canterbury Cathedral. Okay. And so unless you are prepared to put in that work, you're in the wrong choir.
So it's a standard.
Oh, yeah, that's a standard. Unless you're prepared to come to all the rehearsals, then you're in the wrong choir. This is not your Grammy choir. This is a professional liturgical choir.
And
they all know that.
There must be this level of discipline.
Yes, and the music has to reflect what would happen in the cathedral anywhere else. And so the Hallelujah Chorus and the brass and the whole timpani works and the whole big organ and the procession and the smells and bells happen in Christ Church Cathedral because that's where it's supposed to be.
Yes.
And it's supposed to be setting an example. And that music is not something you pick up last week to sing this week. The music for Easter has been planned since last year and been given to the choir members so that no one is surprised when January comes and I say, oh, we got to sing the Lord Now Victorious. What? What? Jesus ain't been born good yet. I say, well, we ain't worried about Jesus' birth because Christmas already finished as far as I'm concerned. I'm worried about Easter now. I mean, I'm worried about what's going to happen on the week of Holy Week. I don't want to wait until Palm Sunday to give you 10 pieces of music that you have to learn in a week. So you have to plan.
Yes.
You have to plan to present something that's credible, not only for people, but worthy for God. That's the part about this. People, you don't just pick up stuff and say God is pleased with this, because God don't be pleased all the time. That's my opinion.
I tell you, it's a joy for me now watching a national service coming out of Christ Church Cathedral.
Yeah, we're talking about. That's what we're talking about there. That's what we're talking about. See, when you tune in, you say, wow, that sounds like in Canterbury Cathedral. Then, I'm pleased. I'm pleased till then.
You're doing a great job. Your choir is doing a great job. I appreciate you joining me today and walking my listeners through this Lenten season.
And they are welcome to come down to the cathedral for our services. Our services online, or you can find out about us. Just give us a call and come and join us for Holy Week.
That's Adrian Archer, Director of Music for Christ Church Cathedral, the musical and vocal adjudicator for the National Arts Festival, and the new Vice Chair of the Dundas Center for the Performing Arts.
God.
You've been tuning into the Culture Caravan. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks,
good to see you again.
Appreciate it, man.